My guests today are film director Deborah Correa and screenwriter Ron Yungul. And Deborah is a director and producer who was chosen for the prestigious AFI Directing Workshop for Women. And her credits include PBS, the History Channel, as well as Spotify and the Travel Channel. And not only that, how about Paramount Plus and Hulu? But while working on the History Channel series The Warfighters, Deborah worked with over 90 U.S. Spec Ops veterans who were both in front of and behind the camera. She continues to work with veterans in telling their stories, and she directed Army Ranger veteran and actor Josh Kelly in Recollection, which premiered at the Sun Valley Film Festival in 2017. And she just recently completed production on her feature film debut, The War Between, which is our film discussion for today. Now, Ron Yungul began writing screenplays while a student in the master's program in film at San Francisco State University, and then went on to be a semifinalist in the Chesterfield Screenwriting Competition and a quarterfinalist in the Nichols Fellowship. He recently wrote and executive produced the Civil War Western feature, The War Between, shot entirely on location in Arizona. He has also written and directed Rafters, a pilot for a 30-minute sitcom, and has 2 projects in development. And ladies and gentlemen, so let's welcome film director Deborah Correa and screenwriter Ron Yungul and their brand new feature film, The War Between, to the show. Welcome.
Thank
Thank
you.
you. Thanks for having us on your show.
Absolutely. Well, I have to say, I love the setting of the story of this film. The Civil War fought in the westernmost territory, and that is something that we don't usually see a lot of. So, Ron, since you wrote it, what was the inspiration behind the creation of this story, and is it based on a true story?
It is based on a true story, first of all. And the inspiration was really after I had seen the director's cut of The Good and the Bad, the Ugly. I started doing some research because uh, I wanted to check the accuracy of. There's a whole sequence in the movie that takes place out in the desert. There's like a big artillery duel, and the head of that Union detachment there gets killed, and they're trying to take a bridge, and Clint Eastwood and Eli Wallach helped them blow up this bridge, and it just seemed sort of like a fabrication. You know, it was shot in Spain, and I figured they were just doing something that was pictorial and they had no base. But then I found out it was actually based on the Battle of Glorieta Pass, which took place in the southwestern region. And I started digging a little deeper into that part of the Civil War, and I knew very little about that. And I thought it would be interesting to do a movie, a very low budget film, because I wanted to do my first feature as well, and something very low budget, basically a two-hander with 2 guys in the desert, or as somebody once said, 2 guys wrestling in the sand for 90 minutes. And so I thought about movies that kind of follow that same sort of storyline, and I thought of a movie I'd seen years ago called Hell in the Pacific, which was with Lee Marvin and Toshiro Mifune. It's a World War II setting in the Pacific, and it's the same kind of setup. 2 enemy soldiers are stranded on an island. They start out the movie trying to kill each other, and they end up realizing they have to cooperate in order to get off this island. So that was sort of the basis for this, and I started working on a treatment and coming up with some plot points and a beat sheet and seeing if I could work this into a movie. And it was about that time that I met Deborah, and things just sort of took off from there.
Well, Deborah, what intrigued you about the story of the War Between to want to direct it?
It was definitely the historical context of it, like the setting, the fact that it was fought out west. I did not know that the Civil War was fought as far west as Tucson. So our the catalyst for the story is the Battle of Picacho Peak, and it is the most western battle of the Civil War. And another element was that there was a Union force called the California Volunteer Force, and it was all volunteers. They pushed the Confederacy out of Southern California and out of the Arizona Territory. And I feel like I didn't even know about that part of it because they were the Confederacy was trying to establish slavery in LA in Southern California, and they pushed them out, and they kept pushing them out. And so our main character Israel is based on one of being a part of that volunteer force. And so that aspect of it also very much intrigued me. And then in my mind, I was like, oh, it's challenging because it'll be these two guys battling out in the desert. But it also was like, we could definitely do this independently and have like the creative freedom to do how we want, what we wanted to do. And I explained before too, like Ron ended up writing a little bit more fleshed out. It wasn't just the two guys anymore. It became like a larger, almost like, I wouldn't, kind of epic, but this larger take on that world. So we see other characters and other worlds of that time period, and that was so challenging given the days and the budget, but we did it. And as the story evolved, there was stuff that he kept writing. I was like, oh shoot, well now we got to shoot that because it's so good. And that was like the kind of fun part of it too, but like the big challenge because we shot it in 15 days and it was extremely hard, extremely challenging.
Wow, that would be challenging. And Ron, you said the good, the bad, and the ugly, and and it was funny because as I started watching the film, I'm always looking at time codes. There was no dialogue for the first 5.5 minutes,
Yeah.
and we're focused on Israel Terry, and I kept thinking, I kept having this thought as I was watching the opening of this film. I'm like, I loved the simplicity of the cinematography because when I watched it, it took me back to the old Clint Eastwood type movies. It took me back to seeing the old TV shows like Bonanza when they were actually outside, not on a set. The Rifleman. So there was this look of it, and to me, what I loved about that, it invited the audience in and not keeping them on the outside of the, like, like incredible and expensive cinematography. There was this space between the audience and the character. So for you, Deborah, when you were asked to direct it, how did you visualize telling the story through the camera lens?
Yeah, that is a really good reference because I watched a lot of westerns growing up with my grandfather, and there was very arty westerns like My Darling Clementine, or like even the Searchers that helped when I was talking to the cinematographer Evan Jake Cohen, who I went to Emerson College with. So we've been working together for a long time. It was those kind of references I could use, and I wanted to blend that with more of like fluid style, like Terrence Malick and like Dances with Wolves was a huge for me when I was growing up. When I was little, and I watched that film, and so I wanted to kind of use those references and blend them and have a more kind of traditional style western with these like flares of fluidity and moving the camera a certain way, and also like the story itself I feel like is not really traditional western, and so we wanted that to contrast with those visuals, and so that was a really fun process. I loved it because we had the epic sweeping landscapes of Arizona too, like near Tucson.
Yeah, but what what was intriguing too was that you have this very wide space, but you were able to contain it and block it off and keep the audience focused on the characters. And
Hmm.
so I love your references to this because I was even looking at some of the lens flares because I'm like, oh, it just adds so much flavor to this film and every scene. And I love the fact that you said fluid because it was. Because I'm always looking between scene to scene. I want to see how it changes. And this film doesn't drag. This is the thing I love about this film is that you see the story slowly evolve. Now, I am intrigued about the names of the two lead characters. So, Ron, I think I'm going to put this one into your ballpark here. Israel Terry and Moses Jennings. Is there a reason the names Israel and Moses were chosen?
Well, yes, in a way. I know a lot of people read some kind of a biblical reference into that, but to be honest with you, my great great grandfather was in the Union Navy during the Civil War, and his name was Israel Terry Halstead. So I just dropped the real last name and used his first name and middle name. And then Moses Jennings just came out of thin air. It just sounded right, I guess. Sometimes, names are sometimes the hardest thing to come up with in a movie. That I want them to be multi-layered and maybe mysterious and maybe sort of a reflection of the character. And I just felt that worked for me. And then it was people had pointed out the biblical connection, and I thought, well, let's make that another layer. It's not what I intended, but I'll take it.
Well, I
So.
was kind of wondering because I didn't know if there was going to be a secret meaning behind the names and their characters. And there's a line in the film, and I love it because a lot of people don't hear this this line very often. I think it's even far more rare in film today. But when Israel and Moses are by that small little area of water within the rocks, this is more towards when they kind of first met. And
Mhm.
Moses looks at Israel and goes, "Is that your Christian name? Or what is your Christian name?" And I'm like, nobody talks like that anymore, but that's how they talked back in the day. So I just love that little element that was added there because it just gave the whole scene and where they came from real meaning.
Well, I did strive to use what I would hope would be idiomatic expressions of that time period. And some of my favorite movies do that. I can think of True Grit, like True Grit and its sequel, Rooster Cogburn. I love the language in those two films because it just sounds authentic, and I got to credit those writers for achieving that. Um, and I think there's certain other writers like John Milius who does the same thing. He really uses a sense of time period for in what was contemporaneous for the 1800s. And I just think it lends it a level of authenticity. Whether or not it sounds natural is not important. It was natural for them to talk that way.
All right.
Everybody was more formal.
Yeah,
Even people that were illiterate were more formal in how they expressed themselves.
that's right. And that's the reason I love the way that both actors portrayed their accent, the way they deliver their lines. That's exactly how people would talk and communicate back in the day, and not trying to make a Western where everybody's talking as if it was 2025. So
Hmm.
this added a very important element of realism. But for both of you, let's talk about the two characters separately. So we have Israel Terry. He's the Union soldier. He's very prideful. He carries a lot of anger, endured a lot of loss, but he appears to be seeking revenge. Is he?
That's a good question. Um, I think when you say anger, that's true. And I think he's not only angry for what has happened to him, but he's just angry at the world in general. And I look at him at the beginning as a newborn baby in a way. He doesn't know how he got there. He really doesn't know who he is. So he's seeing everything through the eyes of a child, but his personality is, kind of, it has to be formed all over again. And just like a little kid gets angry when they're not getting fed or not getting what they want, that's kind of what he's going through at that time.
Yeah. Now,
So
Deborah,
that's
how, yeah. And Deborah, for you as the director, you're looking at Israel, you're looking at Moses. What was your thought process in capturing each of their individuality in this film?
That's a really good question because that contrast really played into how we cast it. We it was like I didn't want whoever played Moses to be too similar to Israel, and so it was kind of a miracle that we found these two guys. It was like the same week, and they had a really interesting dynamic where it was almost like either brotherly or father to son, um, dark and light, shadows, but they both have those. I think that working with the actors and them, they created their own motivations for the characters. So they did deep research into that time period with some memoirs and some journals that Ron had given them. And I loved what they came up with. And so they had their motivations for the scenes. And Sam Bullington, who plays Moses, had a really intriguing approach to how he was going to kind of unveil who Moses really was. I don't want to give anything away, but it
Yeah, no,
comes
no,
out
no,
later.
no. We're not going to do spoilers on this film because that's why I fell in love with this film. Because as it moved along, then there's that point in the latter part of the film when all of the elements from the first half of the film start to come together and are slowly revealed. And I literally we'll get to the scene in a moment without giving anything away. But I just sat there and I went, "Oh my gosh!" I had to replay it, but just to watch it. I think I've watched that scene 4 times, but we'll get to it in a moment. But with the character Moses, and you bring up a good point because with Moses Jennings, he's the Confederate soldier, but he's more level-headed, a bit more educated. But I want to be careful about talking about him because I don't want to give out too much. But his character isn't all that it seems, correct?
Mm-hmm,
Correct.
mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yeah. And that was really fun for Sam and for us to like kind of deconstruct and then build what we made. Uh, Damian Conrad Davis plays Israel. And so it was like I wanted them to have a very unique, specific dynamic that they brought to the character and that they could interact with and create there because the friction and tension they created it was like real. But
Yeah, yeah.
there was some like real like tension there. It was really a very fun set to work on because amazing actors brought so much to it. And I think there was like a lot of I don't know how to explain it, but just like like human dynamics and temperaments that are at play. And we kind of just like went with that sometimes.
Yeah, it was a very collaborative environment. I mean, I think for a lot of reasons, because um, everybody involved just has that sense of collaboration and not trying to have it their own way.
Yeah.
But also because this film was such a short development process, it was almost necessary.
Yeah.
So the actors would come and ask they wanted to know more about the backstory. And I would say, I'm not really sure yet. Let's work on it together. So the actors had an active part in developing these characters beyond what the script says. And I think that's why we were able to
Yeah.
pull it off.
They both created these very vibrant backstories of their lives with their own families and where they came from that they brought to the scenes. And I love how you describe it because the film really is a slow burn. And it builds and builds and builds.
Yeah.
So that part of it, and we had to trust the process with that because we had to shoot a lot of things out of order and sometimes backwards. Like stuff would happen. Like it was very because we were all out. It was outside, so it was like tracking the sun path, making sure the lighting would match, and working really hard with Evan on making sure that was adhered to for consistency. But then I was like, oh my god! But then I have to direct this before this, and then this happens. And so it would have been such a luxury to shoot it in order of how it played out. I would have loved that so much, but we just didn't have that luxury.
Yeah, but most
So we
films are not filmed that way. They're always filmed out of order, and in some cases,
but
the
this
ending
would
is
have
filmed
been so much
first.
better. That's true.
So I mean, uh, so okay. Well, let me. Okay, this is what I'm going to ask both of you because Ron, you wrote it. Deborah, you directed it. With the actors, did they say their lines according to script, or did you allow them to ad lib between what they were given?
That's a funny.
I always allow them to ad lib and I always allow that freedom and to shoot options. And when it came to like specific things with the script, I would say like, Ron, are you comfortable with this to be exact or not exact? And they would go to him with those questions too, because I like to have more of a free flow with actors in terms of blocking and dialogue so that it feels more natural. It's really important for it not to feel stagey or like too blocky, right? But you have to work within those parameters. And so Ron and I would talk about it and then it would be a discussion.
And that brings up a funny element because I was on set the whole time almost the whole time. And occasionally the actors would veer a little bit off the script. And after the take, I would go up. It was usually Sam would try something, and I would say, "Did you mean to say that, or did you just forget the lines?" And it became a joke. It became my catchphrase. And if he said, "Oh no, I thought I would try something different," and then we think about it, and maybe we would go ahead and use that take. Or I no, I forgot the line. Then we redo it, have him say the line. But I always wanted to go through that filter after the take just to make sure that that was intentional or not. So they were very active in not only the characters, but in sort of the adjusting the rhythm or pacing of the dialogue to what was more comfortable for
Mm-hmm.
them.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like it worked.
It did. I noticed that throughout the film. And I love the fact that not only did you want actors that were completely different from one another, but you wanted their characters to be, I guess, how would I put this, very wide and opposing to one another. So we have two opposing soldiers. They have different beliefs. They have different ways in which they approach others. I noticed that Moses was a bit more merciful than Terry. Terry was just ready to pull the trigger anytime he had a chance. I should say Israel. Yeah, Israel Terry. Yeah. He was a little bit trigger happy, I think.
Yeah, and I think that comes from not only his ingrained prejudices, but again the fact that he feels he's not a complete person yet, and uh, but also it's their characters too. I mean, we had conceived of Moses as being kind of a shapeshifter. He does what he needs to do to adapt to the situation, and he's not always being honest when he does that. But that's the way he survives. And and by the way, Sam, the actor who played Moses, he's a genuine Texan, and that didn't certainly didn't hurt the character. So he said things a certain way that I knew was natural for him to say it as a Texan, and that's also why I gave him a little more latitude in how he read the lines.
Oh,
So
I love that. Now, here's the thing that I did. I watched The War Between twice. I went back to look at certain scenes more than that. And I noticed that there were a few hidden secrets going on in the first half of the film that were revealed later. So I loved the buildup. And so, Deborah, I want to hand this over to you. Why the slow, and you mentioned the slow burn. So why the slow, subtle reveal of their past and their current inner turmoils? Because for me, it's set up for an incredible emotional reveal towards the end.
Yeah, well, that was why. And also because I think we're asking the audience to trust us as we take them on this journey, and you might be building assumptions of a character, but don't make it yet because you don't really know. Right. And so I think there's like a lot of nuance to that. And and Ron and I talked about this because like, as we went into building, making this film and having to deal with these two sides, how do you create the humanity that connects all of us? It's like a human story. It's not a side. And there's so much nuance that we wanted to bring to both characters so that it kind of is this reveal of who we are as human beings. Like it's like the micro to the macro. And for that interplay with them, I think it really worked. And that's why we did that way. And I feel like with Ron's script, he did a lot of these like Easter eggs that you're intrigued by, and then you see why later. And I just think that's really good storytelling.
Now, I want to talk about this particular scene, but I don't want to give the essence of the scene away because I found it to be the most important. So I
Okay.
found the most moving scene in the film is that Israel is standing by the fire looking at two pictures.
Mm.
At first, I didn't catch it. But as I watched the scene the first time, I'm like, wow, that's a really great scene. But then something caught my eye. And I went back, replayed it again, and I'm like, is that what I'm seeing? And then I replayed it again. So I watched this scene 3 or 4 times, and Israel learned that Moses wasn't a bad guy after all. How do you want to answer that? I don't want to. What I don't want to give away is I don't want to give away
Well,
the
I'll
pictures
say
because it was beautiful. I love the scene.
I think I know what you mean, and I think I know of a way to say it without giving anything away.
Yeah, yeah,
He dis- he discovers the humanity in things that he previously did not see.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And so that is a little bit of Moses's arc. That is his arc. That's his entire arc in a way, is that he begins to see people as people rather than things. And that's what that represents to me.
yeah. You know what? When I saw that scene, I was just like, you could have ended the film right there, you know, and because I just thought, wow, because from the very beginning of the film, really everything led up to that one moment. And that's what I love about films that are heavily character driven, heavy dialogue. And and here's the beauty for what both of you've done that I wish more filmmakers would do. I have seen some of the most stellar films with incredible writing, incredible film work, and telling the story. You see the small little nuances of the characters, and then it all comes together towards the end. But what you did that I think a lot of people fail at is that you kept the secrets very, very subtle. So as we're the audience watching the characters, we're not figuring it out. It's like you said, Deborah, the audience is going to have a preconceived idea of each of the characters, but in this film, they're going to get it wrong. And that's the beauty. And I wish more filmmakers would be a little slower in the reveals, because to me it makes the latter part of the film become very, very powerful, and that's what I saw here.
Well, Ward, I'd like to throw back your compliments to you, and I'd like to say, I wish more audiences would have the patience to see these things. I just think that that's another aspect of our film, which is kind of a throwback to the old days, is, taking the time to develop characters, letting things develop naturally and not rushing it.
Yeah.
And I think that it takes a little bit of a reset for audiences to get that nowadays, to be able to sit back and be patient. I want to put a sign up, be patient, while you're watching our film.
Yeah, and put your cell phone on airplane mode and stop looking at it and actually sit, watch the
Yes.
film in the theater, enjoy it, learn to understand it, and I think film goers, or just people in general, are so distracted, which is why I love to sit here and watch films, because I tell people when I look at a feature film, the first thing I look at is the ending time code. And the reason is because I'm going to multiply that by 2 to 3 times, because that's how long it's going to take me to watch the film. Because I'm going to stop, pause, make a note, and then just see how it plays out. But your film absolutely surprised me, because there were elements towards the end that I was not expecting. But then when I look at it, I'm like, wait a minute. The hint was back in this scene. And that's just the magic of movie making, and you did it.
Well, that's very gratifying. I think Deborah and I both want to surprise. And I always, when I see a movie, I want it to surprise me. And if it surprises me, I'll let other little things slide. If it did that, I'm happy.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because I think we both like to jump ahead in our mind and try to figure the story out,
Yeah, audience, yeah.
Well, you added another element that I just loved. So you have Israel and Moses, but then you add the Chiricahua Apache Indian, And the thing that I absolutely loved about his character is that we have two soldiers from opposing sides. You bring in what at that time would always be considered an outside enemy force to both of the opposing sides, but the Indian character, he brought a lot of wisdom,
Yeah.
and I think that had a calming effect in different ways to both Israel and Moses.
Mm.
He's older, he has more life experience too. Yeah. They're like the triangle.
Yeah, it's a classic triangle of the human psyche. Maybe he's super ego, and they're id and ego. So it wasn't a conscious choice to do to and analyze it that way, but it kind of came out afterward. We looked at it and thought, yeah, it's kind of got that classic triangle. But
Well, my the funniest scene is with him, and and I watched the scene a few times because it just makes you laugh. And he's
Yeah.
standing on that rock and he goes, "Oh, he may have had the eyes of a cat, but I got the eyes of a hawk." And I every time I watch it, I started laughing and I was like, "Yep," because you know I always looked, because I've interviewed tribal members before, and there's always this spiritual aspect to it. But the way that he said the line was just, you could have heard it in any Clint Eastwood or John Wayne Western. So I
Yeah.
just love the addition of that in this
well,
film.
I got to say, Ward, for Wayne, the actor who portrayed Great Seer, his starting point for that character was Chief Dan George. I don't know if you know Chief Dan George from the Clint Eastwood, from Outlaw Josie Wales, I believe. And we talked about that during his callback for his audition, and I thought, yep, that's kind of the way I saw this. He gets it.
He
He
brought
gets
that
it.
to the
He did.
audition
Yes.
before
Yes.
before Ron
Yeah.
talked to him about it. And I think that Wayne kind of, he like breaks the stereotypes with the way that he does it. And he grounds it in like his character and personality and who he is as his individuality. And so he's just a refreshing part of it too, because it's like it alleviates some of the tension. And I just want to talk about one thing that you mentioned, that with
Mhm.
when people come to a movie with their ideas of what they're going to think about the person, it's almost like the more entrenched you are in thinking that you're right, the more you should question. And I think that this film really brings that to the surface for people to like really look at and analyze, and not just do knee
That,
jerk reaction based on it. So
that's a very good vital point. I never thought about that. And that is true, regardless of the time period. But I feel that you pulled off some incredible magic with this film. Now, I know that it premiered at the Phoenix Film Festival. What was the response to the film like?
we sold out, and people were very emotional at the end, which we loved. This film's been on a journey though, because we recut it for length from Phoenix. So we are now relaunching it, and it's playing at this really exciting festival in Spain in October ish. But we are doing a limited theatrical release September 30th to start the release of it. So we're like pushing everything towards that, working with Tricoast Worldwide on our theatrical, and then like continuing to do some festivals. But it's been a journey, because we did a whole revisioning, not revisioning, but like just like refining, trimming
Mm-hmm.
down,
Mm-hmm.
and also like a whole Foley sound pass, which was so fun to do, because they really got the sounds of the desert and like all of those Western sounds that you want, the sensory stuff. You get that now with it. So it's been,
It's been quite a journey,
yeah,
and
it really has.
it's been
We're excited now for people to finally see it.
Well, how
That's
did well, let me ask you about this, because which I'm really happy that you're going to be doing a theatrical release and not a streaming one. There's more power in theatrical, and for all of you filmmakers out there, one of these days I'll explain why. So I'm happy for that. And but tell me about the music score. I noticed it.
Well, that was written by Dennis Dreeth, who goes back a long way in the business, and we wanted something which was somewhat orchestral in sound. We wanted live instruments. There's no digital music in it at all, no sampling, nothing like that. So it's all live musicians.
Hmm.
And from the get go, we wanted something with echoes of, classic westerns and echoes of Morricone, for example. I mean, some of the cues were inspired by Morricone, um, especially from The Good and the Bad, the Ugly. And we had lots of music, and we gradually, during the revision process, we just pared a little bit away of the music. We wanted a little more sparse, um, and so people always comment on the music. They seem to like it.
Yeah, one of the most exciting things for me was to be in that studio with the orchestra, with the live orchestra. I was like pinching myself. Dennis is an amazing composer. Like he worked on Braveheart. He's an amazing work on films, and we had these world class musicians as part of our film, and they were phenomenal. The whole thing was, it felt dreamlike. And Issa, who is Charlotte in the film, when we were filming, we were about to shoot. She was like, "Oh, I have this song from my past that I learned when I was a teenager, and I think it would really fit this film." And we realized it was like the date match. Something about it was like an old Irish like kind of dirge, and then it was played for the Revolutionary War for the dead, and then again for the Civil War. And so she sang that song, and Dennis composed the orchestration of it with the music, and it's the song in the end credits. So it's like a legit Civil War.
Johnny is going for a
Yeah,
soldier.
Johnny has gone for a soldier. So even that process was like, it just felt magical. Like all of these pieces fit together, and the sound was so rich. Everything was layered. There's nothing digital in it. It's warm live instruments, and
Yeah.
we really wanted to bring that. We wanted that in our film. We wanted to have the real deal.
And I'm glad you did because I have talked to composers who score films, and there's nothing like sitting there with an 80 or 100 piece orchestra, hearing your work come to life, but having the filmmakers there to experience it because I think it makes the whole project mentally just come together and you're like, this is really happening.
Yeah.
Yes, exactly.
Yes.
That's exactly our feeling when we were sitting on the stage recording the music, watching the monitor, and I think I must have said 5 times, "We have a real movie here now."
Yeah. It's so
Well,
yeah.
yeah, because isn't that the feeling? Because you're on set, you're directing, you're doing all that has to be done, but then when you sit down to watch the orchestra play the music score that's going to go into your film, that's the icing on the cake to me. I think that's the emotional part of the filmmaking that just kind of solidifies like we're doing this and we did this.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
So, but Deborah, I wanted to congratulate you
Thank
on
you.
directing your first feature film, which is The War Between. And I have interviewed so many female filmmakers that sometimes I think that they make better directors. Uh, but I hope one day soon we're going to see a female film director win Best Director at the Oscars. That could be you.
Thanks, Ward. I appreciate that, and I really appreciate you bringing up earlier in the conversation about being able to frame it out in the outdoors the way we did, because that was so hard. And it's one of the things you don't think about prior to, but blocking it out and figuring out how you're going to shoot in this expansive space. Thank you for noticing that.
Well,
Yeah.
it was the reason I brought that up. It was so funny. I was interviewing a cinematographer yesterday, and we got onto the subject on how Steven Spielberg blocked the scenes in E.T. from
Hmm.
the interior shots to the outdoor shots, and a lot of people now, and I know the audience never thinks like we think, but with other filmmakers, they need to truly pay attention how they block the shot, how they frame it. Because I have seen, especially with short films, I've seen scenes to where the way that they framed it actually adds and tells the
Yes.
story.
Mhm.
And
Yes.
so it's those little nuances that go a long way in bringing out either the emotion or the meaning of the overall story.
That's right. Yes.
Yeah. Yep.
So, for both of
Exactly.
you, do you have any new upcoming projects that you could share with us?
The answer is yes, and the second part of that is maybe.
Oh, I understand
Right.
about the NDAs.
Well, I mean,
Deborah,
the first script I read of Ron's is a World War II story, and I was like, "This we have to make this," but the budget for it is much larger than what we did. But so that script and that project is in development now, and it's like on the home front, so it takes place in Colorado. Um,
Wow.
mhm. You
You
can
mean the
say
actual
what?
setting is in Colorado?
Yeah.
so it's the there was German prisoner of war camps in this country. A lot of people don't know that, but
Another historical tidbit that might
yeah,
not be known by a lot of people.
it's
That
another historical drama based on real life. So it's German prisoner of war camps that were next to Japanese internment camps, and they both harvested the sugar beet fields. So it's a love story, and it shows the two worlds of that and how they were both treated and what was going on at that time. Takes place in 1942, and that's the one that's in development now, which is fascinating because there's again stuff I didn't know about with our own history.
Wow.
And
I want to see that.
I'm also working on another project about an Army Ranger who was it's a true story. He was fatally wounded on his third deployment in Afghanistan, but he was an organ donor. 21 year old Ben Kopp, Corporal Ben Kopp, and he saved 4 lives with his liver, his kidneys, and his heart. So that story also, I'm working with a veteran who's writing the script about that, and we're very near completion on that. And also another historical drama about Josephine Bonaparte before she was Josephine. She was Rose, and she was in prison for 6 months waiting to be guillotined. And there's a very small chapter of her life. People don't know that story. But that's another one called Madame Liberté, written by Miriam Stark, who is a Polish immigrant. And it's a beautiful script. So there's like a lot of historical drama that I'm like, I'm being drawn to, but also military stories
Well,
and
I
some.
love period pieces. I'm always drawn to period pieces. I'm drawn to uh, heavily character driven films because that's real cinema. I mean, I don't mind the shoot 'em up and blowing 'em up stuff. That's cool to fit in between, but we need real film.
Yes, and a lot of like these like stories that we have never heard about or know about, or these big characters who we already think that we know and understand, but there's like these smaller little pockets of their life that actually made them who they are, but we've never seen the pain and suffering aspect of it. You just see like what came after. But I really do feel like Ron excels at this level of historical drama and bringing a light to these like lesser known and lesser seen parts of our history and
speaking of light, we also have a comedy TV show we're developing right now too, which takes
Yeah,
place in
I read
1965.
that in your bio.
Yeah. So, well, this is something else that it was. I think you'd mentioned Rafters. That's something I did many years ago. But we have a show that we're developing that takes place. I'll just say it takes place in 1965 Hollywood, and it's a little behind the scenes kind of a show. So a little mix of Mad Men, Galaxy Quest, and maybe the Larry Sanders Show. So
Oh, I want to check that out. I definitely want to check that out. And ladies and gentlemen, The War Between is set in the Arizona Territory during the early days of the Civil War. And The War Between is a survival Western that follows a Union soldier with no memory, a paroled Confederate private, and an exiled Chiricahua Apache as they navigate the unforgiving desert and confront the beliefs that divide them. Now, many of you know that I love period films and heavily character driven films, And with the war between, we get both. Now, watching two men with opposing views, background, well, is a tug of war happening in real time on screen. As each scene moves by, there are little subtle secrets that you have to find or they will be revealed to you later. This is the beauty of Ron's storytelling and Deborah's directing. You can't beat the backdrop of the beauty of the desert, a wide open space that becomes very small when we are solely focused on two characters who don't like each other, but deep down, they need each other. So then add the Chiricahua Apache Indian and you see the element of wisdom show up in flesh and blood. And amazing what one can learn from a passing stranger. So when the war between becomes available to the public, you need to see it. And as Ron and Deborah has told us today, it will be coming to a theater near you. So make sure you add it to your must-see list. Again, you can't beat great storytelling. And as I always say, we need more character-driven films, and The War Between checks off all the boxes. So I want to thank you both, Deborah and Ron, for sharing your film with me today. And much success to both of you on not only the film festival circuit, but also at the theater.
Thank you, Ward.
Thank you, Ward.
It's been a
Appreciate
pleasure.
it.
You're very welcome. And ladies and gentlemen, you can catch all of the Bond on Cinema interviews at bondoncinema.com. Check out our Prime show, our YouTube channel, and you can listen to us on your way to work or play on Spotify, iTunes, and Audible, and so many more. I want to thank you for watching. And you know what? You're either going to see me at the movies or from the red carpet.
Dear Charlotte, if I am dead when you read these humble words, I want it to be known that I died fighting for what I know to be right.
Whose side are you on?
I was just doing my duty to my country.
Your country! It's our people. Our country! You are our people!